I was 22 when when I was first in charge of it, right?
So I'm listening to your audiobook this morning and you're like, they put me in charge. I graduate from college. They put me in charge of a nuclear reactor. The good news is it comes with a manual.
Yeah.
I'm
And
walking up a hill, cracking up. There are people, I'm sure, driving by me going, this guy's nuts, right?
and so when I left the Navy, my dad called me a fool,
Oh,
right? And he said, all you got to do is stick around for another 15 years and you get a
right,
retirement. And I'm
right.
like, Dad, you don't understand. My marriage will not last
Yeah,
another deployment.
yeah,
And so then when I left corporate America to go selling orthopedics, he called me a dang fool
yeah,
or words to those effect because he was like, you can't take a straight commission job
yeah,
right there.
yeah,
Um, promote. I think promote in marketing has sort of got a bad name. I
yeah.
like to use the word evangelize,
There you
right?
go.
If you've got passion for what you're doing, right? You want to evangelize the category, you want to evangelize your current clients and tell
Yeah,
their stories, right? And really get that out there. And so it all starts with finding the right podcast,
yeah.
right? It's this idea of you can't say enough of the right things to the wrong people.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using New Calm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Tom Schwab, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. I've been working with your company for months now, actually probably more than that, but I've loved every second of it. You guys are amazing, and I've been looking forward to this date and this interview for a very long time. So I'm super excited for you to be here. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about Interview Valet. We want to talk about your audiobook that I just started this morning, podcast Guest Profits. I didn't know you had one. And when I found out, I immediately bought it and listened to it on my walk this morning. So very cool stuff. I can't wait to finish it. Thanks again for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. And one of the things that I believe is that the best gift you can ever give someone is introducing them to a new person or a new idea, right?
Yeah.
It can change their world.
Yeah.
And I appreciate what you do because that's what you're doing every episode here. And you never know how that's going to change people's lives. And I hope people learn something today or at least entertained by looking back on my life.
We're going to give them some value for sure. So where were you born?
I was born in Winona, Minnesota, banks of the Mississippi. I don't remember. We moved from there about when I was 3 years old. And I remember asking my dad later on, that place was beautiful, right? We went back to visit.
Yeah.
Why did you move? And he's like, it was a great place to live, but a hard place to make a living. He
Yeah.
was in the printing industry. So they came back to the Chicago suburbs. My dad had grew up in the city and my mom was out in the suburbs. So a place where I call home was St. Charles, Illinois,
There you go.
38 miles west of Chicago. It was a great experience. And my dad always would get us into the city of Chicago because he didn't want us to be suburban kids that were scared of the city.
I just interviewed somebody yesterday that grew up in Chicago. Wow.
Well,
Moved
and
when they were 23.
I'm always cautious when I say I grew up in Chicago because anybody that grew up in Chicago, if I say I grew up in the Fox Valley, they're like, oh, that's Iowa, right? But
I love that. That's so cool. So growing up in St. Charles, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
In hindsight, it was like Mayberry,
Yeah.
right? Everybody knew everybody. It was a small town. It was still an agricultural town.
Mm.
And I think probably the best thing that I loved there was being Jim Cunningham's grandson, right? My grandpa ran a service station. He retired, by the time I was probably in grade school, but everybody knew Jim Cunningham.
Mm.
And he was an entrepreneur, a local person that knew everybody. And it was like I got instant credibility for that. And it sort of opened doors, and it reminded me that relationships are the ultimate currency,
Yeah.
right? Years after he was passed away, people would come up to me and see me and, "Hey, how's your grandpa doing?" "Oh, he
Mm.
passed away about 3 years ago," right? And they're like, "Oh, that's why I haven't seen him. He was great," and they tell me his story.
Yeah.
And so I think that's something that even applies now, right? How you're known throughout the community affects other people.
My grandfather was big where I was. I mean, big and very, very, very popular. He turned 97 on his 97th birthday. 110 people came to his house to wish him happy birthday, and they had had a ice storm the night before, and there was this much ice on the roads, and 110 people braved that ice to come see him for his birthday, for his 97th birthday. I
And
mean, just unbelievable,
I
you
think
know?
people forget now in the digital world that you still have a reputation.
Yeah,
And if anything, it's amplified
yeah,
because people can put it up there, right? And in a small town, you're known as either a crook or an honest man.
yeah.
And one of them will bless you, the other one will curse you. And it also can go on to your family too.
I just finished Mark Benioff, the founder of
Yeah.
Salesforce. I just finished his book Trailblazer, and in there he talks about his grandfather. His grandfather was one of the major forces, and there's still a plaque to this day at the entrance of BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit.
Okay.
That was his vision, and that was something he pushed federally, state, the whole thing, locally, the whole thing. Um, so he still talks about how amazing it was growing up in his grandfather's shadow. It's just that is such a cool relationship. And I got a chance to spend a lot of years. I farmed with my grandfather for 9 years in Oklahoma, and it was the single best thing I ever did in my life. Just it was the hardest work I've ever done, but it was the single best thing I ever did.
Yeah.
So, so, so being Jim Cunningham's grandson, right? Growing up in St. Charles, you loved that. It sounded like it was Mayberry, right? I think we know the answer to this already, but I ask everybody, who was the most influential person to you growing up?
Hmm. I'd have to say if I had to pick one, it would be Bob Lundeen.
Okay.
Who was my first boss, right? We weren't well off, so I could have anything I wanted as long as I paid for it, right? So I was mowing lawns, I was um, shoveling snow, I was caddying,
Mhm.
and then I got a job working for someone that was, heck, I think he's 11 years older than me. Here I am at 4 probably 15,
Mhm.
working at a liquor store owned by somebody that's 25, and he taught me so much business lessons, so many life lessons. I think he believed in me more than anyone else,
Mm.
and I always point to him as the reason that I got into the US Naval Academy. He sort of opened that door for me, and he believed in me before I believed in myself.
Wow, that's cool. I love that. So we're gonna talk about the Naval Academy in a second, but in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
I enjoyed high school, right? I enjoy learning. I would have to say it would be more in the math and science,
Yeah.
right? That's how um, my mind works. My college roommate always wondered if I ever passed an English class because the only way I got through the academy was him proofreading all of my papers.
Yeah.
He thought English was my second language. So I always excelled more at the math and sciences. And I think that's how my brain works. At one time, as a kid, wanted to be an architect and build stuff. And now I look back and I'm like, yeah, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I'm an
Mhm.
architect that builds stuff and has a whole lot of fun with it.
So math was your favorite subject. Did you have a favorite teacher?
Um, yes, Mrs. Fitzmaurice, 7th grade, right? She even though we were in 7th grade, she probably treated us more like we were in high school or even in college,
Mm,
right? She was always challenging us, believing in us, and um, I learned more in that and worked harder in her class than anything.
that's so cool. So you end up graduating from high school and you go to the Naval Academy. I heard through the grapevine, so to speak, right? Another interview that you did, that there was a clerical error. We're going to get to that in a second. But you go to the Naval Academy and you're crediting Lundin for helping you get in, right?
Mhm.
Um, can you talk a little bit about why you chose the Naval Academy, number one, and number two, why mechanical engineering?
Okay, it's really easy on why I chose the Naval Academy, right? So here I am, and I looked at colleges,
Hmm.
and one that I liked was Northwestern, right, in Chicago,
Yeah.
beautiful. But do you realize, Mike, at that time, Northwestern for tuition, room, and board was gonna be $10,000 a year, and
No,
I looked at that
no
and I
idea.
said, $40,000 a year? I'll never make that much in my life to ever pay that back.
Mm.
And so here I am working at the liquor store, and all of a sudden, this guy walks in who Bob knew, and they're talking, and this college student had just come back from Australia,
Mm.
and, he'd been around the world and everything, and I'm like, "Well, how does that work?" And he starts to explain to me, "Well, I went to one of the service academies, right? And it was the Naval Academy, and they paid for it. He actually got paid to go there, monthly stipend and everything,
Mm-hmm.
and then he saw the world." And I'm like, at that point, I had never really been more than, I don't know, 200 miles from my home. And I'm like, "They pay you, it's free, and you get to see the world?
This works
Sign
for me, right?
sign me up." And it was like
Yeah.
I was too naive to realize how hard it was, and Bob believed in me, so I applied, went through all of the interviews, and, by the grace of God and a clerical error, I got into Annapolis.
Unbelievable. So you get all the way through to your senior year and you go to the doctor, right? And
Mhm.
they're like, "Hey, you have this depth perception condition. You can't even be in the Navy, and you've already been in the Naval Academy for 3.5 years."
Yep. Before you get commissioned, there's something called the pre-commissioning physical.
Right.
And everybody has had that little test where they say, is the ball inside the box or out of the box?
Right.
Right? Everybody can pass that. I can't,
Yeah.
because I can either see the ball or the box, not
Yeah.
both of them. And so I told them, I can't tell the difference. I've got monoscopic vision. I can't fuse images. And with that, the corpsman sends me off to the chief sends me off to another doctor, the other doctor sends me to the chief of ophthalmology at Bethesda, and he looks at me, he goes, "You have monoscopic vision." And I said, "Yes, sir." And he looks at my chart and he goes, "You can't be in the Navy with this." And
Wow.
I'm thinking, they're going to kick me out. And he's like, "Don't worry. They've invested enough money in you. You'll get a waiver on that." So
Wow.
that was my God story from there. And really, why mechanical engineering? It's really because I couldn't decide,
Yeah.
right? And it's one of these things where it's like, do I be a naval architect? Do I be an aeronautical engineer?
Mhm.
And somebody explained to me there's, chemical engineering,
Mhm.
mechanical engineering, and electrical engineering. Everything else is pretty much a spin-off from there.
Yeah.
And I like to build things, so I went for mechanical engineering. And for me, it was the right choice because it sort of aligned with the way I thought. And I think while I don't do engineering today, I still tackle problems with an engineer's mindset.
Gotcha. That's awesome. I can see that, by the way, in your entire career. Like, as I look at your history, as I researched you before we got together, it's literally you're solving problems everywhere you go, and you're looking at it. Pardon me, you're looking at it in terms of a problem-solving mentality. You can tell that you've been doing this entire time, and you're really good at it. By the way, wanted to acknowledge you for that. So do you mind if I share something with you? My
Please,
son
please.
graduated from University of Nebraska at Lincoln. I told you that.
Mhm.
And he graduated with a mechanical engineering degree, minor in biomed. And I asked him about the biomed thing. It made him, he had to stay an extra semester to do it. So it's 4.5 years altogether. And he said, Dad, he said, I want what I do to help people, which I think is like one of the sweetest things ever, right?
Yeah.
Of course, I'm biased, right? I'm his biggest fan, So he was up there for his end of his 4th year, and the summer in between, he had a conversation with my mother, his nana, and she said, I think Michael's homesick. And I said, well, then we'll bring home to him, because he had just been hired for an internship for the summer, so he wasn't going to be able to come home. So I load everybody up, including his sister, and here we go, right? The 3 of us up there. So we go up to overstay our welcome, do the helicopter thing, get him completely sick of us, right? And one of the mornings, the girls wanted to sleep in Thursday morning. I said, hey, can I take you to your favorite breakfast place? I want to just you and I have, yeah, Dad, right? So naturally it's a place just off the campus at University of Nebraska at Lincoln that makes crepes. This kid is a nut for crepes. I mean, I don't get it,
They're
but
good.
he just is, right? So I take him to his favorite crepe place, right? And we're sitting there. I said, there's a question I wanted to ask you, just you and me. And he said, okay. I said, if there were no restrictions, money was no object, perfect world, what would you do for a living once you've graduated? He said, I would invest in real estate with you. This is a kid that's getting a bachelor's in mechanical engineering and a minor in biomed.
Mm-hmm.
And he would, perfect world, he would be investing in real estate with me. I'm like, what? Really? Why? And he said, Dad, he said, you're never more magnetic than when you talk about investing in real estate. He said, I don't know anybody with a pulse that wouldn't want to work with you. I'm like, wow, you could have knocked me over with a feather. Okay. I'm not joking, Tom. You could have knocked me over with a feather. This is a kid that wanted nothing to do with real estate growing up. Nothing. And what a 180, right? I walked out of there just completely floored. Anyway, it's just one of those moments in life where you just kind of go, really?
As you tell that story, I'm not surprised, because it's like he wants to help people and make impact.
Yeah.
And, there's a reason I loved engineering, but didn't want to be an engineer,
Yeah.
right? Because I just felt like I was in a cubicle working on something. I loved operations on the ship,
Yeah.
but just to be an engineer, it's not something I wanted
Yeah.
to do, but to interact with people, help people.
Mhm.
And then, at the end of the day, when you look back, it's not about the paycheck. It's about how many people remember you, how many people you
Yeah.
helped.
Yeah.
And you think of, all the families you've helped, the businesses you've helped, that makes an impact.
Yeah. And I just love that. Anyway, okay. So you leave the Naval Academy and they put you in charge of a nuclear reactor at the ripe old age of 22.
I was 20. Yeah, I was 22 when when I was first in charge of it. Right.
So I'm listening to your audiobook this morning and you're like, they put me in charge. I graduate from college. They put me in charge of a nuclear reactor. The good news is it comes with a manual.
Yeah.
I'm walking up a hill, cracking up. There are people, I'm sure, driving by me going, this guy's nuts, right? People think that anyway, but you know what I mean, right?
Right.
Like, oh my goodness, you had me laughing out loud and I'm sucking oxygen trying to go up a hill. Anyway, it was hilarious. It was hilarious this morning. Sorry. So it came with a manual. You did that, it sounds like, for 5 years, right?
I did. I ran, let me put on
Go
there.
ahead.
First, I went through a year of school. So
Yeah.
they put you through 6 months of classroom training.
Yeah.
It's like drinking from a fire hose. And then they put you in 6 months of, they call it a prototype, right?
Yeah.
So you're not on a ship. You learn how to do everything. Then they put you on the ship. So
Yeah.
I was on the ship for just under 4 years, and it was great. I was on the commissioning crew for the USS Abraham Lincoln. At the time, it was the newest and finest aircraft carrier. Today, it's just the finest.
Yeah.
But it was a great, great experience.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Well, thank you for your service and keeping us safe. From the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it. So you leave the Naval Academy and you go to Michigan, it sounds like, and you go to work selling orthotics, which you said was one of the less sexiest things on the planet.
Well,
It
there's
is,
a
except it is unless you have plantar fasciitis or back problems like I had. The minute that I put orthotics in my shoes, I was better.
oh yeah.
I was better. So I think it's a little sexier than you think it is.
Well, there's a little portion in there that I don't know if it didn't make the book, but I went from the Navy to working in orthopedics for
Yeah,
Stryker,
right.
and it was engineering, operations, distribution. I did all that for about 18 months and hated it.
Yeah.
And so when I left the Navy, my dad called me a fool,
Oh,
right? And he said, all you got to do is stick around for another 15 years and you get a
right,
retirement. And I'm
right.
like, Dad, you don't understand. My marriage will not last
Yeah,
another deployment.
yeah,
And so then when I left corporate America to go selling orthopedics, he called me a dang fool
yeah.
or words to those effect because he was like, you can't take a straight commission job,
Yeah.
right? That's too risky. You've got a family, a mortgage, you got
Mhm.
kids. And I'm like, Dad, I can do it.
Yeah,
And he lived long enough. He passed away way, way too early, but he lived long enough to say, "You were right. That was the best life for you."
yeah,
And so it was fun.
yeah. Well, parents say that kind of stuff because they're trying to protect you, right?
Yes.
First job I took in real estate, 100% commission. And my mother was flabbergasted, gobsmacked, whatever you want to call it, right? And she was just like, no, 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 no. Well, if you fast forward, like 8 years later, she comes to work with us at a real estate office that we opened and worked for us for 18 years. Well, all of that real estate office was paid for with that commission income from from that job that she told me, no, 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 don't. You're right. It's part of
And
it. Your parents are always trying to protect you.
and they love us. And
Yeah.
what he told me was true for him, but it wasn't true for me.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that I always mindful of, right? When I share my experience with somebody, this is what worked for me. Pull the nuggets out of it that work for you. It was a different time. You're a different person. But this is my story.
Yeah. True. So you move to Michigan, you work in orthotics, you sell orthotics, right? You create your own company.
Yep.
Crutches gone or something?
Well, so I was selling for Stryker, orthopedic implants, was a
Right.
distributor for it. And then we had a sideline business. And if you ever seen people on those little knee scooters
Yeah.
after surgery and everything, well, back in what was that, 2008, 2007, you couldn't find those anywhere. So I was selling orthopedic implants to
Mhm.
other to orthopedic surgeons, and they were looking for these. And I said, okay, here's what you do. You buy them from this manufacturer and then rent them out to your clients. It makes sense. And they're like, no, I don't want to do that.
Mm.
You buy them and then we'll send our patients to you. So it started helping out buddies.
Mhm.
And then they told friends, it's like, where did you get it? Oh, just send them to Schwabi.
Mhm.
Literally, it was in my garage. And from there, we went to like buying containers of them coming in. Right. And we took it from a regional player to a national leader. We were HubSpot's first e commerce case study. And once again, you talked about what your son said about making an impact.
Mhm.
The reason that we really doubled down on that business is because all of the times that I was in orthopedics, I can count on one hand the number of thank you notes I had,
Yeah.
right? And these knee scooters that we would send out, I'd say 40% of them came with letters that came back and said,
Mm.
handwritten thank you notes on it. And it's like, we're doing good here.
Yeah.
And so we kept expanding that. And we were expanding just as 2008 hit. Um, big recession. And it's like, I don't want to build this, the old way with brick and mortar and everything. So
Yeah.
that's why we built it up with more like an e-commerce brand with inbound marketing. And that taught me a lot of things. We built it up from a regional player to a national leader and then sold it off.
And it was the name of the company was?
Goodbye crutches.
There it is. And you got that from a customer.
I am
It's
not the
like
smart.
Interview Valet, by the way.
Yes, I am not the smartest person. Um, but there was a joke we used to have in the Navy that you have to be smart enough to know right answer when told,
Yeah.
right? So when a client told us, you should call this company Interview Valet, I'm like, huh? And he's like, yeah, and I just bought you the domain. This will work. Or
Mhm.
somebody said, well, what's the name of your company? And the legal name was Surgical Specialties Medical Devices LLC, right? That's why everybody just said, send them to Schwabi,
Right.
and it's like when somebody said, oh, you should call it Goodbye Crutches. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, I love it, man. That's so cool. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about Interview Valet. We're going to talk about you getting into podcasting, and we're going to talk about your book, Podcast Guest Profits. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. We're back with Tom Schwab from Interview Valet, also the author of Podcast Guest Profits. And we're actually talking about Goodbye Crutches, right? And you end up getting out of the medical device business and you end up in podcasting. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So it's an evolution, not a revolution. And
Yeah.
so when I sold my previous company, people said, well, how did you grow the business? And I'm like, tapping into other people's audience, right? We used guest blogs,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how we drove all the traffic. But by this time, it was 2014, and I'm like, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So I went back to first principles and said, well, how does anybody grow their business, right? Going back to my grandfather, he'd
Mm-hmm.
go to the country club, he'd go to the Rotary Club, and he'd talk where the people were.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started to think, well, it seems like podcasting is starting to take off. I wonder if you went on podcasts and started telling your message there, if you could get that know, like, and trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tested it. It worked really well. I wrote this cheesy little PDF to tell you how to do it. And I was in a mastermind group down in Nashville. And during I call it my sabbatical phase, and people are like, oh, you should do a course. And so I did a cheesy little course. And Mike, I never took it out of beta because people weren't getting results with it, right? The average course is finished by 3% of the people.
Mm.
And I'm like, I don't want to sell something if only 3% of the people are going to get results from it.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, one of the early beta testers came and said, listen, I love the course and everything, but I just want to be the guest. You take care of the rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, huh, that's good copy there too. And that was like our original tagline, and it's still what we do, right? We work with inspiring thought leaders, right? Humble heroes that have something to say to the world. And we let them be the guest and we take care of all the rest. So we really refer to them as the talent, right? They come up like Sinatra, they perform, and we take care of all the back end on that.
Yeah. And your company, by the way, I've been working with them now for months. Karen, by the way, is amazing. Will you tell her I said hi?
I will do that. She's also my bride, and
Yeah.
she's proof that God loves me and wants me to be happy.
Yes, she is, by the way. Yes, she is. She's an amazing woman and an amazing talent. And your entire organization is just awesome. And I love working with them as a host of a podcast. And I love the way that they present people and the way that they approach me and follow up and all that kind of thing. It's awesome. Just absolutely awesome. Um, and it says a lot about your leadership. Can you talk for a second about promoting a podcast, promoting a product, and sort of the ins and the outs of podcast guest profits, like strategically landing on a particular podcast in order to reach that particular audience?
And I'm going to switch words on you there.
Yeah.
promote. I think promote in marketing is sort of got a bad name. I
Yeah.
like to use the word evangelize,
There you
right?
go.
If you've got passion for what you're doing, right? You want to evangelize the category, you want to evangelize your current clients and tell
Yeah.
their stories, right? And really get that out there. And so it all starts with finding the right podcast,
Yeah.
right? It's this idea of you can't say enough of the right things to the wrong people.
Mhm.
So using data to find those right podcasts and then looking at it as the start of a conversation,
Yeah.
right? I later in life, I went back and got my MBA in marketing, and my grandfather could have told me what marketing was, right? It's starting a conversation with somebody that could be a great client.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you start that conversation? And it's not spamming 1,000 different podcasters, right? It's building that relationship with one.
Mhm.
And while Karen is the face of Interview Valet to you, we've got 20 people
Yeah.
on the team, all remote. But the thing is like not all of them reach out to you. That would be overwhelming. So we assigned different people to different podcasts or different clients, right? So there's that one-on-one relationship.
Yeah.
One of our core values is that in this digital age of automation, the personal touch makes the difference.
Yeah.
And we set that 10 years ago before
Mhm.
AI, and it's even more true. So think about how can I build the relationship with the host first,
Yeah.
right? So, and people will say, well, how do you do it? What tool do you use? I'm like, it's a strategy, not a tool. So
Mhm.
if you're doing it yourself, identify the podcasts,
Mhm.
listen to them, leave them a rating and review. People look at that, right?
Mhm.
Follow them on social media, make a comment. All of a sudden, they start to know who you are, right?
Yeah.
That give, then ask. And
Yeah.
when you're giving, you say, you reach out to them and say, Mike, I love the podcast. You have the most amazing guests. You ask the greatest questions. Tom Schwab, he was a little bit different, but that's okay, right? So making sure it's not that they know that you really listen to it, and then
Yeah.
come back and say, I think I have something that could help your audience. You do that, and they'll be asking to be on your podcast,
Yeah,
right? And
and they,
we,
that's I think that's important. Let's just stop for just a second. I think that's important. I don't necessarily follow my social media interaction as much as I should. I don't have anybody on my staff that does. And so when your people reach out to me and they say, "Hey, Mike, we I listened to your podcast episode with so and so," right? And I just loved the question you asked, or I loved that type of thing. That appeals to people like me because this is a labor of love for me, right? Your episode 354, 355, something like that. And I think I told you we're in 75 countries worldwide. We picked up six the other night in one night. It's crazy. And I never imagined that would be the case. And I look at the actual countries and it just boggles my mind. I'm like gobsmacked. But the thing that I love is I put a lot into this. You know that, but I put a lot into this. And for somebody to see it, listen to it, and recognize what they feel like are the strengths or what they feel like appeals to them, that kind of thing. I love that. And that's how they start their message to me. You with me?
Mhm.
We've had over 1,000 requests to be on this podcast. And your people, I look at that they're from Interview Valet and I open their email first because they're my favorites. And I'm not telling you that because you're on the podcast. I'm telling you that because you trained them correctly. You have the right values as a company in terms of how, and by the way, and Karen, of course, but right, I'm a big fan. This is one of those things where she developed that relationship with me, and and then other people that came from your company. I mean, it's the first email I open.
Well, thank you. And it was interesting. There was a podcaster, Joe Saul Sehi. He's the host of Stacking Benjamin's podcast. And a
Mhm.
couple of weeks ago, he posted a rant similar to what you just said on LinkedIn. And he's like, there is so many AI engines out there
Yeah.
that can do spam at scale. And he called us out as one of the great ones that builds that relationship.
Yeah.
and he put a picture of the pitches that he got.
Mhm.
And some of them said, Dear Stacking, Dear Benjamins, Dear
Mhm.
Joe Saul Seahigh, Cumulus Media, right?
Mhm.
This guy reaches 500,000 people on his podcast and is simulcast on Cumulus Radio.
Mhm.
And you can't take the time to get his name right.
Right.
And he's like, when I see those and I see that it's all just AI slop, he says, I don't care who the guest is, right? I'm not opening it. I'm not saying yes to it.
Yeah.
And it's that whole thing of there are certain things that are very, very efficient to do, but not very effective.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, the way you build relationships with hosts, that's not scalable. I don't know if it's scalable or not, right? We've been doing it for 10 years. It works. That's what I can tell you.
It doesn't have to be scalable to be effective. It's effective. And that is, and you know, what people don't understand, and it's I didn't understand it. When I got started in this, I was begging people to be on this podcast. Absolutely begging people to be on. I chase people. I'm still chasing people. Full disclosure, I'm still chasing people. The thing is, we're at a place now where we're getting the requests coming to us, right? Last year in January, in a 4-day period, over 400 people asked us to be on the podcast in 4 days. I did 50 interviews the month of February. It was like I had to interview all of them the month of February. I don't know what that was about, but I immediately, after I didn't remember February and I was sort of looking at, counting more bags under my eyes, the whole thing, it felt like all I did was eat, sleep, and interview. Pretty much all I did. I got some exercise in. That was pretty much it, right?
Uh-huh.
Then I had to figure out, okay, now we need to start managing this, right? We need to start. And so that was when I started looking at my schedule, started prioritizing that kind of thing. People that host podcasts get hundreds of emails a day. Hundreds. And the fact that you all understand the power of relationship and how important it is that you invest in that is a real game changer. It really is. And I know I'm bragging a lot about you, but I'm telling you the truth. I'm telling you exactly how I look at it as a host, and how important it is to us.
And
It's vital.
the longer we work with somebody, the easier it gets for them because,
Yeah.
you know, so many of the people that are pitching to, blackhole at gmail.com, right?
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to see that.
Yeah.
And often we get to this point where they're like, could you just send it to my personal email? Or a
Mhm.
host will say, just text me.
Mhm.
And that we have relationships with some hosts that will have given us access to their back end, right? And
Yeah.
say, if you think they're a great client, just go ahead and filter all of those, put all the information right in there.
Yeah.
And so that's that level of trust. And
Yeah.
we know that their podcast relationship manager, they're vetting every guest before it goes there. So
Yeah.
we've got the client account manager that vets it to make sure it's a good fit for the client. And then the podcast relationship manager, Karen, in your case,
Yeah.
vets it because she knows if she introduces somebody that isn't a good fit, that's going to burn the trust,
Yeah.
right? And everyone, she wants to build that trust. And if you say no, that's fine, right? But we always want to know, how did we miss the mark here?
Yeah.
Right. And if we know that, then we can put that back into our system and say, no, Mike doesn't want to talk to, um, French mimes, right? That's a bad fit.
Yeah.
So that we never introduce them, introduce another French mime.
We have a tough time with interaction on a podcast when we're dealing with a French mime.
It doesn't,
It's great video, but the audio's terrible.
the audio just loses it.
So you've been doing Interview Valet now for 11 years?
Coming out in 11 years. Yep.
11 years. What's your favorite thing about Interview Valet?
The people that I get to meet, right?
Yeah.
And without a doubt, that is the most valuable thing to me
Yeah.
and the thing that fires me up every day, right? I'm sitting here in Kalamazoo, Michigan,
Mhm.
right? A suburb of Kalamazoo, Michigan. And I could go anywhere in the United States, probably most everywhere in the world, and there's somebody that I know that's a podcast host, that had been a client,
Mhm.
anything like that. And even some of the people that we've worked with before, right? I grew up as a baseball fan, right?
Mhm.
We did Daryl Strawberry's last podcast book tour. And
Mhm.
I almost wanted to take a picture of um, the screen, the Zoom screen, right? Of to tell my buddies, I was on a call today with Daryl Strawberry and his wife,
Mhm.
Reverend Strawberry, right? His last book was awesome. It was on the opioid crisis. Um, Eric Weinheimer, right? The first blind man to summit Mount Everest.
Mhm.
I walk through the airports and you see his picture up there. And, my wife will go, "Oh, look at there's Eric's picture," right?
Mhm.
I have picked up my phone before and one of his kids said, "Hi, Mr. Schwab. This is so and so. And my dad's setting up for a podcast." Their dad's blind and had a question. And he just said, "Just grab my phone and call Tom." Right. And it was like, that is so cool.
Mhm.
Um, like I said before, the idea of the best gift you can ever give someone is introducing them to a new idea or a new person, right? The people from Play Bigger, there's 4 authors, they came to us when they were launching their book, and they introduced me to the idea of category design.
Mhm.
It's how I've shaped my business now. It's
Mhm.
how I look at life. So there's all of these things, and to me, those are what's most memorable,
Yeah.
right? Uh, and that's the things that's gonna be most memorable, and I from our team, I think they would say the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
one of our team members said, "I have become the best conversationalist ever," or in their group, right? And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" It's like, no matter what the conversation is, right? If you're doing real estate, she probably dealt with a little bit of a real estate, client before, right? And so she can talk a little bit about real estate, right? You talk about longevity. We've got some clients that are in the health, nutrition, and wellness can keep up a conversation on longevity. And so to me, I love learning. I love talking to people. And, this job pays me to do that.
Yeah. Okay. I have a couple of questions that are probably not going to be the most comfortable, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Okay.
Please.
So, what's the number one thing that you're working on with Interview Valet to improve on?
To get Tom out of it,
Yeah.
right? I'm the bottleneck.
Yeah.
I the bottleneck is always at the top.
Mhm.
And this is something I have struggled with for a long time, right? And last year, my wife and I took 6 weeks off and we hiked the Camino de Santiago in Spain, right? I check in with the business every day and everything. But that was the best thing I ever did for myself,
Yeah.
for my business, and for my team because they raised up to a new level. They knew that I trusted them. And so when I came back, I got to walk in as a new person almost because
Mhm.
all the stuff that they took over, it's like they're doing it better than I was.
Yeah.
Why don't I just do that? So I'm really looking at it. In the military, they said one is none, right?
Mhm.
And I think I want to make sure that I'm developing the people. And to do that, I've got to make it less Tom centric. There's a reason if you go to our website, um, I am not on the front page. I have never been on the front page. I'll put pictures of our team. I'll put pictures of our clients, of our podcast hosts, but it's not about me.
I got you. So, what are you seeing in the future? What's your vision in the future for Interview Valet?
Yeah, a great question. We've tried a bunch of different things, right? We tried for a small time. Should we produce podcasts too?
Mhm.
Right? We could do it, but we're not excellent at it,
Mhm.
right? And so we're like, no, we don't want to do that. For a while, a third of our team is bilingual. And so we thought, let's do interview valet Espanol, right? We tried that. We just didn't get the traction with it, right?
Mhm.
There's a different, just because you speak the language
Mhm.
does not mean you understand the culture
Correct.
of of Central America.
Yeah.
So, we test different things there. But what I see it more is as we go forward, that human conversation is more powerful.
Mhm.
And so many people talk about podcast guesting, right? To me, podcast guesting is an activity.
Mhm.
I think this is not an interview, it's an asset.
Yeah.
I don't think this is an appearance. This should be marketing. And so trying to work with people so that they can get more out of every interview, right?
Gotcha.
Don't just do more, but get more. And so
Squeeze it, right? Get the juice. Yeah.
squeeze it. Yeah, if you're going to spend 45 minutes on an interview, don't look at it as a transaction. This is
Right.
the start of a relationship that Mike and I have.
Right.
This is content that we could repurpose, we can
Mhm.
promote, do all of those things. Heck, you can put it into a book. You can put it, well, here's something that we're doing, right? We're
Mhm.
doing more and more with AI. So last year, like I said, I didn't want to be the only person speaking for my team.
Mhm.
So we took 4 of the leaders and said, "We want you to go out there and talk on the podcast." And they understand what we do. Um, and but they've got their own sort of viewpoint on it, right?
Mhm.
We've got somebody that runs the health, nutrition, and wellness pod.
Mhm.
I am not the face of health, nutrition, and wellness, right?
Right.
But Chloe can speak to that. And one of the things that we did with like AI is we went through and said, okay, let's look at the last 50 interviews
Mhm.
that Tom did. And now pull out, our key points of view, our brand voice. And this is something that big companies spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars on, right? You can look
Mhm.
at a BMW commercial,
Mhm.
and it looks different than a Tesla commercial. Well,
Yeah.
Tesla doesn't have commercials, but you get my point,
I
right?
got you. Yeah.
Um,
Subaru and BMW are different. I got you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's that idea of what's that brand voice. So we
Mhm.
got that and then started to train our people on that. And then we
Mhm.
started to train our AI on it. So when we repurpose the content, right? Um, and they know we don't sound like Grant Cardone, right?
Mhm.
That's not what I'm doing. And so they'll do it in our tone. And so it's amazing the tools that we can use, the data that we can have available in order to get our clients more and more value and results from every interview. Because today it's not only your ideal clients that are listening to podcast interviews, it's the AI that refers them, right?
Mhm.
Every podcast interview is getting indexed by AI, and that's how you get recommended by them.
Yeah. Okay. A little bit of an uncomfortable subject, but I think it's important. And it's why I wanted to bring it up. I wanted to talk about this before we finish.
Mhm.
When I say generosity of scars to you, what does that mean to you?
To me, that's being able to take arrows for other people, right? That's that's part of mine. It's like as a leader, I should be out in front.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that I hear from that is I call it experience shares,
Mhm.
right? So in the Navy, we used to say it's stupid to learn from your own mistakes. It's
Mhm.
stupid and painful, right? Learn from other people's.
Right.
And so that generosity of scars is I've got a lot of scars in my life, right?
Mhm.
Some of them I like to talk about, some of them I don't, but I need to talk about all of them, not to tell you what to do, but to share my experience and that you may learn from these, right? And I think too often people talk from their wounds
Mhm.
and they don't have the wisdom to look back and put meaning to it, right?
Right.
I 2 of my children have been through divorces, right?
Mhm.
I was through a divorce, right? I didn't talk to them about that until they were going through it, and they didn't ask me questions about it until it was meaningful to them.
Yeah.
And I didn't wanna tell them anything until they asked,
Mhm.
and it was painful to relive and share with them, but I didn't want them to go through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I never told them what to do, but I said, "This is how I viewed it," right?
Yeah.
Never said anything, you know, derogatory about their mother or anything
Mhm.
like that, but this is how I went through it.
Yeah.
And it's like that, the worst person to take divorce advice from is somebody currently going through a divorce, right? Because they're too close to it, but it's that
Mhm.
generosity of scars to me means being able to share the lessons that you've learned with other people.
I'm
Did I
going to tell
get it
you why
right?
I asked. I'm going to tell you why I asked. A couple of days ago, I did an interview, podcast interview with an author who wrote children's books about diet. And I knew there was a reason. And so I asked her before we started the podcast interview, I said, what happened? What was it that caused what life event happened, right? We were already going to cover it because it was in her life story. But so then she told me, she said, I really don't want to cover that. I said, wait a minute. I know it's uncomfortable and I know it's something that's embarrassing, but we have to share with people what we've been through in order to share with them how we've championed it, right? How did we come through it and come out the other side and make it a success, right? It's literally why it's so important to her and compelling to her to do this. That's why I brought it up, because I believe it's incredibly important that podcast guests understand the generosity of scars, because they need to be sharing those things that are uncomfortable, that they think it's a downer for people. It's not. It's just the opposite. People will relate to you because of your struggles you've gone through. Okay? Because they don't live perfect lives either. You've been through a divorce. Other people are listening to this have been through a divorce. That kind of thing. Does that make sense? That's why I felt like it was incredibly important that you and I have this conversation, because you're in this world and you're a big, big part of podcasting, especially podcasting with guests and that kind of thing. I feel like it's incredibly important that people hear us about the generosity of scars and be willing, even though it's uncomfortable, be willing to share and be vulnerable with the audience.
And you said, well, here comes an uncomfortable question. I don't mind those anymore. And we always tell people, you got to be able to talk about anything, right?
Yeah.
If there's something that's off limits, usually the host asks you beforehand.
Yeah.
But for most people, it's like, I always look at it as everything I've ever done or said is probably indexed on the internet, right? When we talk about cybersecurity, well, it's behind, encryption. I don't know. Somewhere somebody has found that, right? And I'm an open book on that. And I think also, like on podcasts, I realize that anything I say, my mom could hear, my grandkids could hear. I don't swear on podcasts, right? Do I swear in real life? Yes. But I try not to swear on podcasts, right? Why? Because I don't know who's going to hear it.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to live my life like everybody can see everything.
Yeah.
And then I'm not surprised, right? If I write an email, I've got to assume, I don't care if it's an internal email, that someone could hit reply all and send it to everyone, or that if I send somebody a DM or a text, that they could take a picture of that and put it up on the internet. And I think it's that vulnerability and just doing the right thing.
My standard is,
to.
if my dad was right here or looking over my shoulder, would he be proud of me?
Yeah.
That's my standard, right? So, Tom, I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they reach out?
I was going to say, just go back to interview Valet with the V.com/MLE for the Mike Litton Experience. I'll put all my contact information there. There's a free copy of my book, right? You can buy it on Amazon, but you can get a free copy there. My calendar scheduling link, and we've even got an assessment. Will podcast interview marketing work for me? All that's back at interviewvalet.com/MLE.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you. Tell Karen I said hi, and your team.
Thank you, Mike.
See you soon. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.